Trump's rallies, a striking example of political performance art, are far more important to him than they might be to a conventional politician. Not only do they give the president the center stage chance to bask in the adulation of a crowd, they also in many ways define his wild presidency and give an impression that Trump is marshaling a massive anti-Washington political movement. View 2020 presidential election polling. Trump has plans for more rallies in Arizona, Texas and Florida, states where the virus is fast rising again after early economic openings that he demanded. The events will likely focus attention on his denial about the pandemic and inaccurate judgment that the United States has prevailed over the crisis. His ostentatious refusal to wear a mask, meanwhile, is undercutting his own government's message that face coverings could significantly slow the spread of the coronavirus and actually accelerate a resumption of normal life. U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Jerome Adams on Sunday undermined Trump's implied argument that government-mandated changes of social behavior to deal with the virus are an infringement on the basic rights of Americans. Some feel face coverings infringe on their freedom of choice, but if more wear them, we'll have more freedom to go out, Adams wrote on Twitter. In many ways, Trump's presidency is a series of interconnected and choreographed moments, from his summits with North Korean leader Kim Jong-Un, which have done nothing to convince the isolated state to quit its nuclear drive, to staged announcements like a recent decision to quit the World Health Organization in the middle of a pandemic. Critics saw that decision as an attempt to deflect blame for his own failings in fighting a virus that he long insisted would not be a problem for the U.S. and has now killed more than 115,000 Americans. State polls show clear shift toward Democrats since protests began. State polls show clear shift toward Democrats since protests began. This was the case, for instance, when he visited France in 2017 as a guest of honor at the country's Bastille Day parade and returned home determined to stage his own spectacular with himself as the centerpiece. The event eventually materialized into a hugely controversial celebration on July 4 last year that pleased his supporters but alienated millions of Americans by politicizing patriotism and raised grave questions about the president's use of the military as a political prop. One of the key questions at November's election will be whether the message that the president is sending to his supporters and their middle-of-the-road swing voters, with his brazen showmanship, will be sufficient to assemble a winning coalition or could end up turning more voters against him. Trump fires back about ramp walk. The president and his re-election campaign have spent months trying to portray Democrat Joe Biden as infirm and mentally and physically unfit for the rigors of the presidency. But the White House has refused to be upfront about the president's own health, including a mysterious and unplanned visit to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center last November. And when critics raised questions about Trump's slow walk down the ramp at West Point, he couldn't handle it. The president, who turned 74 on Sunday, fired back on Twitter with his own narrative about what happened, which only served to amplify the moment. A panic button moment for Senate Republicans. A panic button moment for Senate Republicans. The ramp that I descended after my West Point commencement speech was very long and steep, had no handrail and, most importantly, was very slippery. The last thing I was going to do is fall for the fake news to have fun with. Final 10 feet I ran down to level ground. Momentum. The president wrote in a tweet early on Sunday morning. The West Point graduation went ahead even though the cadets had been taking part in online learning since March, since the academy is in New York, one of the hardest hit areas during the pandemic. The president made